Go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 6 o'clock. It's the October 15th, 2018 meeting of the Addison Northwest School District Board of Directors. Thank you. And looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I so move.
Second. Thank you. I do need to add an executive session, actually prior to the one that's on there, so we'll make, for the purpose of discussing superintendent evaluation, executive session B, and A will be for the purpose of discussing labor relations agreements in accordance with 1 VSA 313A1B. And Christina, I will send that to you. Any other changes or edits to the agenda? All right, all in favor of accepting the agenda as amended, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Okay, carries. That brings us to public communication. Hello, everybody. Is there anyone who would like to say anything tonight? Did you want to say something?
No, I was just waving hello. I was just waving you back. Just acknowledging your greeting.
Oh, we can all do that.
Oh, it's a friendly crowd. Okay, so we will move on to board and committee reports. The superintendent's report. So Sheila sent out some information about safety training, a link to safety plans, school nursing summary, and a budget timeline. Did you have anything that you wanted to add or emphasize?
No, I didn't know if folks had any questions about any of those things. They're all very different from one another. But the safety mindset training, as you know, is sort of part of more of a year-long focus on safety, and this is just laying the groundwork for that further work. We intend to do an overview of Alice training some point in the winter. We'll be meeting with that community safety team, and I always forget of the official name. If Gloria was here, this is where she would tell me. I said, be nice, Gloria's not here. I'm so used to her being here. The district level, the public safety team will be having that meeting as well in the winter, and the building-based safety teams are meeting, and we'll pull that group together. So the actual Alice training that will happen in the buildings is something we have to schedule with administration. So when the staff come all together for the Alice training, that's an overview of the process, but to actually do the training, they have to be obviously in their buildings doing that within, the context of their own school. So that will be harder to schedule, but we'll work over the course of the rest of this year and into next year to get those put in place. So
There was a link within the link that went to a parent video.
yeah.
I watched it, and I don't know if anyone else watched it. I thought it was really
Yep.
good. It clarified the difference between a lockout and a lockdown, which
Right.
was a source of confusion here,
Yep.
I think, last year. So I liked it.
We're trying to figure out the appropriate sort of communication framework to share that information with parents so that there's context. We don't want to just push out a random video here or there. So whenever we find good resources, we're trying to collect them and pull together more of a communications plan. But we've got to make sure we're all using the same language and so forth in order to do that so that it makes sense.
Can you just tell me what Alice means?
Alice stands for, Kathleen can help me.
Alert. I is inform. I've got to back the L. Communicate. And you got it right there? You are so good. Alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. Excellent.
So it's more of a modified protocol in and around what to do in the event of a school crisis, an immediate crisis. So it's a more specific version of what we already have in place for managing school safety and school crises. It's a much more specific, hands-on, almost like training to really prepare people of what to do. And I myself have not ever been through it. I know Kathleen has, but people that have been through the training say that they feel very prepared and that it's very worthwhile when they've gone through it, even though nobody wants to think about this topic, or it's hard to have those kinds of conversations, but I think the extent to which folks can feel prepared for something that we hope will never happen, I think you know, I don't know if you would have anything to add, but Kathleen was in the Fairhaven district,
I was
so.
working in the Fairhaven district last year, and so we had a lot of extensive training, professional development, and sort of best practices reviews, and a lot of lessons learned from that situation. And I think it's not all that different than what we're doing now, but it's updated. Like anything else we do, we use best practice and most recent statistics and information from others' crises to learn from. And so it's updating what we already know. Our students and staff already know how to do a fire drill. We already know how to do a secure the building. Alice asks you to take those two things and sort of make some decisions based on where the concern is coming from. So it's in addition to what we do. It's not that we're removing what we know. We're updating it and coming up with a third option that really talks about responding to the environment that you find yourself in that moment, but in a skilled way. So I've done it with staff, and the feedback was it was highly valuable to them. They felt much more comfortable having opportunities to practice, even though it's a tough topic to talk about. I think it's time really well invested.
Yeah, some of our neighboring districts have done it, and I spoke with a couple teachers who went through it, and they said it was pretty emotional,
Yeah.
but that it was really helpful, and they actually were asking if our district was going to do it.
So the answer is yes. In terms of the school nursing, because this came up just as a topic the last time we were together, I just wanted to give you a little background information and context for how I understand the staffing changes to have occurred. So I don't know if you have questions about that, but I tried to just sort of summarize some information for you so you're aware. And then I put the budget timeline in there, which was agreed upon with the Finance Committee. So we're going to be interfacing with the Finance Committee from time to time throughout the process, and the Finance Committee will help us sort of anticipate where further clarification might be needed, or help, you know, just sort of tune the process going before it comes to the full board. So I think that's the role there.
And talk about communications as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it looks like the first draft of the budget will come to the full board on November 26th.
That makes
Right? I think, I mean, it's usually.
That's
like-
right
usually when we do?
around.
Okay, I keep thinking January.
think
I
that's
know
the
you're working on
final.
it before.
That's
I know you're
when you-
working on it before
Yeah.
then, but
It's when you sort of have it locked in.
It was
by
late
then.
last year. I think it was
Oh.
later last year because we were waiting for negotiations to settle.
Waiting for the state to give
Yeah.
us some more information.
Some more information, and our negotiations were still not settled, so we were waiting for all that data to roll in our salaries and benefits.
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
I just was wondering if that school nursing information was with that parent that came forward
Yep.
last.
Any other questions on these items for Sheila? So we have a human resources update on healthcare. So that shows, basically, it shows the uses and expenditures related to HRAs, right? And brings us up to date, I'm sorry? And the FSAs, and it brings us up to date on the statewide issues in claim processing. Actually, Z, would you just walk us through the charts? It was, I have to admit, it was not entirely obvious to me how to interpret the purple line. Probably should have been, but it wasn't.
The blue line on either chart, so the first chart on page, I think it's on page 3, the single coverage claims history. The blue line is showing the maximum annual out-of-pocket, that exposure. The red,
Employee.
per covered employee, yes. And then the red line shows the annual first dollar. So for a single, that was set at $400, and then for our family, two-person, parent, child, or children, and family plan, that's at $800. And then the green line shows the HRA annual value. So either the $2,100 or the $4,200. And the purple line actually indicated each individual employee that's covered under a single plan or under the two-person through family plan.
Oh, okay.
So it's just their journey through the deductible.
So is this overtime? I can't see the
So it is,
bottom axis. So
oh,
is it overtime? Or is these
So
taxes
the-
of individual employees?
the bottom line actually starts with number 1 and goes to 43. It's just number of individuals.
Got it.
And the bottom of the two-person starts at 1 and goes to 120.
Okay, I thought it was showing some growth over time.
No, so it's just to kind of show,
Data points then, right?
Hmm?
Each X on the graph
yes, is an individual person and where they are on that journey.
It comes through all. So in other words, we have one, on the single coverage, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 employees who have gone above the 2,500.
Correct, so their coverage is currently being paid by Blue Cross Blue Shield. They've met their out-of-pocket annual deductible, so any further charges to the end of the year will be covered 100%.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Z? So where are we at with DataPath?
So last week, DataPath reported back to the Vermont School HR Professionals Group that they had found a little over $600,000 in misclaims, and that they were manually entering those claims. Now, not just for us, the entire state, 90% of the state was covered under the old TPA, our third-party administrator. So they're manually adjusting those HRAs. They're also working on looking at each transaction and card swipe under the FSA, under the Section 125. And the FSA is the flexible spending account, and also dependent care. So they're working through that, and we're hoping by the end of October that they will have rectified the FSA portion. They can only do one part at a time, and they elected to do the health reimbursement accounts first, because that really was the bigger financial exposure to the employees versus the $400 or $800 if they were looking at $4,200. So they wanted to try to get those monies pushed to the employees as quickly as possible. And they're still working through if there's been overpayments and underpayments to the employees, and hopefully that will all be resolved. If the plan is owed money back because of an overpayment, say the employee swiped the card and they got payment, and then the provider also got paid, then they'll be looking to the employee to pay back the plan. And DataPath, who's our TPA, will be helping us and the employees return that money to the plan that's owed. I can't tell you where we stand right now because
Okay.
it's very much moving.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any questions for Z? Thank you. All right, that brings us to the business manager's report. Thank you, Elizabeth. There was a lot of information there. Very thorough.
One of the things I was going to chat with the finance committee next time we meet was, when we first talked about presenting reports for all the other funds to the board, I think in the past you guys really haven't received much of anything by way of that. So this was the first run, and I gave you exactly what you see on your general fund for all of those funds, but I can only run them separately for balance sheets, so you get every single page balance sheet for every single fund that's out there. And that's a lot of data to take in, so I'm gonna have a discussion with the finance committee and just kind of sort out, is this really what we wanna see every quarter, or is there something else I could do to summarize all of that data by fund or something that would be a little bit more beneficial for you guys, but still give you the same end result information, but without so many pages and so confusing.
Right.
So we can talk about that. Other than that, I think everything on my report is pretty well spelled out. We do still have, after I ran financials this month, we discovered there's a number of student needs and things coming through with big contracts and stuff. So there's a sizable amount more of encumbrances coming through in the month of October.
Okay.
For those contracts. Some of those generate revenue and some do not, if they're special education eligible.
Right.
So that'll be pretty telling when we run October reports. And then I also have a presentation I've been asked to kind of present. I was not real clear on exactly what was desired, so I hope I have something that helps everybody
Okay.
kind of understand financials and just kind of accounting in general, or how it pertains to the school district specifically, not just like accounting out there in the
Right.
world. So hopefully it helps everybody, and if there's other questions that people had when they thought of the idea of having a kind of financial overview, we can always tweak it, and we can have a better presentation for next time.
Okay. Any questions for Elizabeth on the reports before she does her presentation? Okay. It's all yours. Thank you.
I have these slides also on paper if anybody wants to
Oh, cool.
have a copy. Sometimes that's- look at it.
A tree.
And it does kind of flip like a book, like this way.
Thanks very much.
And this one takes us along. Unless you have a bunch of questions. All right. So I tried to find someone who looks like a teacher up there, but kind of looks like he might be conducting music or something. So ANWSP, financial reports, how to read and understand our financial reports. Maestro. She's the conductor. So my first thing is, what is fund accounting? And I tried to be a little bit cute with some of this. So government and nonprofit organizations aren't interested in making money. So they use an accounting system called fund accounting. Fund accounting essentially groups your financial data together into funds or accounts that share a similar purpose. This way, the organization has a better idea of what resources it has available to complete a specific task. Fund accounting is not a topic enjoyed by people who are used to the concept of for-profit accounting. So it's one of those things, if you work in a for-profit business, a lot of times the concept of fund accounting doesn't really make sense to them because their goal is completely different than ours. Municipalities and profit or loss. Governmental municipalities, which is what we are, we're a school district. It can also be a town, a city. Treat money in a distinctive way. They're not trying to make a profit. Ideally, a district wants their expenditures to be very close to the revenue in any given year. Differences between revenues and expenditures are called surpluses. They're a positive difference, or deficits, a negative difference. But don't forget, surplus is not a profit, nor is a deficit a loss. Districts aren't in the business of hoarding money, nor are they in business at all, as it were. Unlike a for-profit company, if a district finds itself operating at a surplus, it will take steps to lower the tax burden for its community. And I have the students teaching us about that on the little chalkboard there. Definitions. What is an asset? So I brought in some little clip arts. I thought it was kind of cute. The little building has money stuck in the roof. I'm not really sure. It's almost like it's a piece thing.
Putting money in our roof.
Inventory, cash, something valuable that an entity owns or benefits from, something that an entity has acquired or purchased, and it has a dollar value to it. An asset can be something physical, such as cash, machinery, inventory, land, buildings, or it can be an enforceable claim against others, like accounts receivable. Somebody owes you money. Rights, such as a copyright, a patent, a trademark, or an assumption, such as goodwill. Now, most of the time, those lower 3 and 4, you're not going to see those on a school district balance sheet. You're only going to see 1 and 2. Assets shown on a balance sheet are usually classified according to the ease with which they can be converted to cash. So that's why you're going to see things like, obviously, cash is cash, but also things like accounts receivable is less easily convertible to cash than something you could sell. You know, an asset that you could sell is sometimes more reasonably transferable to cash.
So how are they classified? I mean,
Usually, basically, they're listed at top under current assets, typically. I mean, I look at our balance sheet, and you just have, right now, you have your checking account balance, you have maybe your inventory of, if it's a food service, you might have inventory, you have accounts receivable, you have prepaid expenses. So pretty much all of yours are relatively current assets. Some of those other items that wouldn't be as easily transferred into cash would be listed as not a current asset, just an asset. So they'd be lower down on your balance sheet.
is there a number applied to goodwill?
Somehow they do come out with a value to that. There's a formula for it. I don't know that I've ever seen anything like that in a municipality. It's usually the for-profit businesses that have goodwill.
Okay.
That seems like an oxymoron.
Yeah, I know. We should have goodwill, right? I don't know how we would assign a value to it, though. What is a liability? See this poor guy carrying the heavy load on him? A claim against the assets of the organization. So this is arising out of past or current transactions. Your liabilities are owed to someone outside the organization, or they can be owed to other funds within your own organization. So when you see a due to, due from, if our food service owes our general fund, you're gonna see that in a liability account. Accounts, salaries, and benefits payable, long-term and short-term debt, and inter-fund transfers, which is that due to, due from, due between funds. Those are the things that show up as a liability. What is a net asset? Net assets is defined as the total assets minus your liabilities. So in a sole proprietorship, if you had a small business and you were a sole proprietor, your net assets would be reported as owner's equity. That's how you'd be seeing it. So there's different words according to what kind of organization you are. In a corporation, this would be your stockholders' equity. And for an individual, if I'm going to the bank and I want to get a loan for myself, it would be my net worth. Yep. So, all that information about what those three items are translates to how we read our balance sheet. Our balance sheet report, and I'm looking, when I was doing this slide, I was looking specifically at our balance sheet and how it's reported. Some places report a balance sheet with their assets on one side and liabilities and net assets on the other, and they show them balancing. Ours is reported in a landscape format, so we have assets at the top, then liabilities, then net assets. Our balance sheet report shows assets listed and subtotaled first. For our general fund, currently, this is cash, accounts receivable, and prepaid expenses. Next, we see the liabilities listed in subtotal. Note that when a liability on a balance sheet is in parentheses, negative, it means we actually prepaid that liability. And you'll look, if you look at our general fund one, that was the one I was looking at, you can see that a lot of times things like health insurance are one of those where we may have paid the health insurance VHI bill the month before, the week before we actually get into that month, because we're required to pay it that way. For the month of July, we have to pay that bill in June. And at that moment in time, we haven't withheld anybody's premiums out of their check yet, because we haven't for that particular month, and we haven't accrued the employer side of that liability. So it shows up on your balance sheet on that given moment in time when I run that report as a negative. Third, we see net assets. The most important piece in this section is the fund balance. This is the amount of surplus or deficit that we ended the prior fiscal year with for that fund. It doesn't mean that's your fund balance as of today. That's the amount you ended the prior year with. Note that the interfund accounts on our balance sheet, now this is something we discovered in our audit, our interfund accounts, as I was just saying a minute ago, when you see a due to, due from transfer, should be a liability. You look at your balance sheets here, they're showing up as a net asset. That is wrong. They should not be. It's not affecting your balances, it's not hurting you, but it's just something in the way the system was set up, and it's probably something as far back as when you converted to this software in 2008 or something like that. Whoever instructed, was probably a software engineer and not an accountant, and they told you how to set up the account. So we're going to fix that. We're going to fix it as we convert our chart of accounts this year. So that's when.
But it's still doing the correct
It's still doing the
function.
correct thing. It's not
Yeah.
showing up in the correct place on your balance sheet.
Right.
Yep. And no one would know that because no one ever looked at a balance sheet. But now we're looking.
Yay.
Last, we see current activity, net revenue and expense. This is the portion of the report that actually relates you back to your revenue and expense reports you see every month. This amount is equal to the revenue minus your expenses in the current year to date. So basically, if you were to try to figure this out, if you ran an expense report and a revenue report for just your general fund and you looked at your actuals, how much did I receive, how much did I spend, that net activity number should match what's on your balance sheet for that fund. Okay. So now we go to revenue reports. You see my little arrow up there in tiny, tiny words that says budget, actual, anticipated. The revenue reports for our district show what we budgeted, what we have received so far year to date, and what we expect to receive for the remainder of the current year. It's only current year activity showing in a revenue report. The tricky part of estimating revenue, and this is your anticipated column, is that we must make educated decisions about what we expect in revenue and continue to monitor those and update those. That's why you'll see every month I'm looking at the revenue. Sometimes it doesn't change and sometimes it does. That doesn't mean, if it doesn't change, it doesn't mean I didn't look at it. It means I still agree with the estimates that we have in place, and I still think they're going to actually follow through and be the amount we're going to receive. If you see them change, it's because some other variable, maybe it's a revenue that's related to your expenditures, and I had to increase or decrease it based on what we're actually spending. What happens if the revenue declines below our budget expectations? What does the district need to do? You see the little dollar signs going up and down. The best course of action for the district when they can verify that less revenue will be received is to net that loss against your current budgeted expenditures and disallow spending past that amount. So that means basically, if you know you're going to get $100,000 less in revenue, that you don't want to spend your entire budgeted expenditures. You want to spend $100,000 less, and you want to somehow earmark that and even track it in your financial software to make sure that it can't happen, so that people can't put in requests against that $100,000 that you're not going to get. If revenue rises above our budget expectations, what can the district do? Can we spend more than we budgeted in expenses? You see these little people carrying their little stacks of money. Unfortunately, the answer here is no. We cannot spend more than our budgeted expenses. Our voters have voted on the total expenditures, not the revenues netted with the expenditures. Increased revenue will result in a surplus in your general operating. Will and should. Expense reports. The expense reports for our district show what we budgeted, how much we have spent year to date, what we anticipate to spend throughout the remainder of the year, which is your encumbrances. We can budget reserve for expenses between lines and funds that are only within that general operating. So for you, that's your general fund, your special ed, and your early ed. Those all roll up in your audits to one fund. So even though we have them in 3 separate funds, the auditors treat them all as one. So we can transfer between those if we need to for budget expenditures. As long as the overall total budgeted and the amount spent does not exceed the voter approved amount. Current activity, so that's that number again at the bottom of your balance sheet. Current activity in your balance sheet each month, and this is just reiterating, is the revenue you've actually received minus the expenditures you've actually paid. It does not reflect the estimated revenue that you think you're going to receive or the encumbered expenses. So that's the biggest, I think, thing that people get a little bit confused by. Sometimes if you are to run a balance sheet at any given time and you see that my fund balance is $2 million, but my net activity is negative $2,100,000. Oh my gosh, we're running a deficit of $100,000. Well, at that very moment, snapshot in time, you might be, but that's because your revenues don't come in at the same time you're spending your money. So that's another little piece that is confusing to understand. Any questions? See all the hands raising and the color. Yes.
I just have a comment. When I looked at all of those reports, I'm like, please, Finance Committee, don't do that. It just makes me go cross-eyed.
I felt very bad for you all.
A little bit simple.
Yes, so that's what I'm hoping too, and I don't know, I've got some suggestions, and I'm hoping that, some form of summary where we can show maybe on each fund, total revenue, total expenses, and then the balance sheet numbers of how that, how that reflects on a balance sheet, but in a consolidated one report type snapshot for each fund. It will still be a lot of data. I mean, it is a lot of data. You have a lot of funds out there. But hopefully it would be better than seeing a balance sheet for every single one, a revenue report for every single one, and an expense sheet.
That was really helpful, thank you. I noticed in some of the reports that the adopted budget column was 0. So is that just a glitch, or is that?
Yes, so there is you mean in the other funds, not the general fund and those ones that you normally see. So these are in some of the other funds. So
Yeah, I
in
think like the expense reports or something,
Yep.
there was 0.
Yep. So a few of them might be. So for instance, let me think, like the fund where your performance contract is run. Well, there really isn't an adopted budget. Technically, there's a budget because you have a $7.6 million bond that you're using to fund that. But you don't really load a budget for the bond account, but
Yeah.
yet you're paying those EEI bills and they're showing up as expenditures. So
Okay.
that would be one example. There might be a few others I can think of.
It's the revenue reports.
Some in revenue, and that's a good question. I
Yeah,
was
it was
actually
the
hoping somebody
revenue
was going to ask that. So revenue, as we were talking about in some of this, in some cases, you might have a fund balance left over from a prior year. You've got $3,000 left over at the end of your year.
Yeah.
You're allowed to spend that money in some cases in the following year because you have permission from the grantee or whatever, but you're not going to get more revenue. So you have no budget for revenue. You've already got the money. So in those cases, all you'll have is a balance sheet with money in it, that $3,000, and an expenditure budget of $3,000 to spend that money, but no revenue showing up in a budget.
Okay, so this revenue budget to actual has got an adopted budget column, amendments column,
Yep,
and a revised budget column,
yep.
and then an actual year-to-date.
And in it, does it have anything in any of the 3 budgeted columns?
In the adopted
all
budget
0?
column, they're all 0.
All 0.
Everything that's listed.
Okay. Yep, it could be. Yep. And in some
Does that mean it
cases,
should be that way, or there's,
if
didn't we
it's,
adopt in the budget for all these lines, or not?
well, adopted budget is when you've actually had voter approval to have a budget, or you've submitted a grant award to, say, the Agency of Education. Someone has authorized you to have an adopted budget.
Okay,
Sometimes a revised budget is how much of that fund balance do we have that we can put into the revised budget or amend it so that we can spend that money.
so this is all really tied
Yeah.
into the fund balance.
Yep,
Okay, I'm good. Just trying to
confusing.
get
Good
my head
question.
around it all.
Right, I mean, there's a lot of numbers.
Here's our 600.
We're not all accountants. That's why we have you.
That's why I did this.
Anyone else have questions for Elizabeth? Thank you.
And I am curious to know, like, if this is what you kind of felt like you needed, if there's anything else that you think of along the way that, gosh, I just don't, like her question was very good. If there's anything you don't understand, we can build on this for future years, and even, board members that are new or whatever, we can just keep building on it if there are things that you feel like aren't touched upon in this.
Do you have this in electronic form that we could
I
have
do.
in a folder
It's
somewhere?
Yep, it's a PowerPoint.
Attach it to the
Yep.
minutes.
I can do that.
But we can also put it in the folder.
That'd be great, just so I could find it if I
Right
want.
next to our budget,
I
right?
won't be able to find it.
The amount of reports that
She's
I
heard
felt
that.
that way too. And actually, I feel like I would spend less time taking all the numbers and summarizing them for you than I did actually physically having to PDF and print each one of those and save them all because they were all separate files.
But you did exactly what the committee asked you
I
to do.
did,
And,
yeah.
and the fact that we've never seen it before, so we've gotten it once, and
Right.
now
Yeah. And now
we
we
can have a
morph the
conversation
format
about
of
how
we're
to-
doing
yeah.
it. Yeah. I
to
was pretty sure we were gonna wanna change what we're gonna
but we have everything.
do. You do.
It's great to see though.
Yeah.
Right.
It shows
Yeah.
you the volume of all the data that's in there, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Thank you very much.
You're
All right,
welcome.
hopefully that was helpful. As we head into budgeting season here, have a little bit of understand. Okay, so that brings us to the principal's reports. And there was a lot of professional development mentioned in all of those reports. That's great. Some personalized learning, flexible pathways, proficiency-based learning series. So those are all the things that we've been talking about, and we can see that the teachers are attending professional development around that. I wanted to actually point out, because Stephanie had mentioned that some teachers were doing the proficiency-based learning series, and if the board noticed in the October 8th e-news that we always get copied on, that the reporting software for the middle school is up and running, so all of the parents can now access their kids' progress on proficiencies, which is good, because I believe that's the first class that's going to be having proficiencies straight on through, correct?
No, not really. We have classes here in high school that are being assessment.
Oh,
I think she means like for purposes of graduation and then as a graduation
Not
standard.
exactly.
Oh.
okay, do you want to say
Yeah,
more about
what
that? I am not,
Okay.
Yeah, it's a new grading platform.
Okay.
okay.
It's just like a link on the UHS?
You'd have to have, you could, if you have a student
Yeah.
who's being assessed that way, you would have gotten a welcome email with access information.
It's actually individualized by each student. So in the past, there's been Power School, but that just shows you a grade. So now that we're transitioning to proficiency, they switched to a new software that shows it in that way. But I don't know, maybe there was some sample slides in a presentation that was done at the open house that maybe could be shared out that weren't tied to a particular student.
My previous,
That may have been linked in Stephanie's report.
you can
And
also get the middle school handbook that's available
Yes.
online, and there are some, there's some additional information in there.
yeah, that might actually be a good link for people too, if they're interested. So, what else? Did anyone else have anything about?
Student and parent ones. Middle school SBL handbook.
I just wanted to comment on what's going on in Addison. I just really am excited about what your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, encouraging kids to look at people in the eye and invite, and sit with someone that they've never sat before at lunch, and that's really neat. I'm dying to hear how it goes.
We did it, and it went well. It was a particular week called Start With Hello, which was actually put out by Sandy Hook Elementary. That's the school who started it. We work on decreasing isolation of students. But it was offered to all schools in the nation, and Sheila had shared it with us, and I had read about it. So we participated for that week. I believe there's going to be another focus week in February with another similar theme that we will, when more information becomes available, we'll look at it and do it again. But I think it fits well with our PBIS system we already have in place and complements responsive classroom well. I think it's a nice complement. It wasn't really anything different, just a little more centered and focused for the kids and staff. You know, we all did it together. So Monday was Hey Day, like H-E-Y, when we all wore name tags, and made sure we had eye contact with each other. And so it was staff and students doing it together. Same thing in the cafeteria. I think it makes a big difference when we model it with our young children.
Yeah.
So it was time well spent, and I look forward to the February opportunity to see what they're going to guide us to do this time. Those were all borrowed ideas. I can take credit for none of those. Those were all from Start With Hello. We just simply implemented them.
Well,
But you can take credit for implementing them.
There's a lot of good
Yeah, and
materials out there.
sometimes you need to steal ideas. They're, you know, you don't always have to
Educators
reinvent
borrow
it.
all the time.
Well, you shouldn't start everything over from scratch.
I know.
Good. And then I think all of the principals also referenced the bond improvements that are continuing. Locking the door lots, the lighting, the heating. And I think at this point, all of the buildings have all of the doors locking and the buzzer systems working, which is awesome. So, good. Anyone have anything else for the principals?
Yeah, I have one thing. So I was trying to figure out how, like, we have a few policies that follow all the way to entering into the handbooks. And I'm just wondering, are the handbooks, were they up to date? Are they up to date and they've been given to parents? Just because there's a couple on the website, I know there's thought around the website about making some changes, but there's what's going on with the handbooks? Because those matter for policies being implemented.
I'm happy to share my practice. It may not be the exact same, being that I'm new, but
Yeah.
we offered it to parents electronically. We did not print hard copies due to
Yeah.
cost and distribute those.
Yeah.
And at times in a parent discussion, I may reference a page or print a page, but we certainly don't print. Our current practice is not to print the entire handbook and
Yeah.
hand it out.
Is it linked from your website, though?
Yes.
The current one?
Yes, electronically,
Okay.
yes.
I think that's your point. Is
Yeah.
that some of the
But they're
ones
not
that
up
are
to,
linked
they're not all
But-
up to date.
But I think they would reflect, in my building, they would
Yeah.
reflect last year's administration, not the current administration.
Yeah.
So that's something that will have to be updated over time for sure, as part of
Okay.
just systems improvements.
Okay. So it's just, like, it's labeled 2017, 2018 handbooks.
What is not labeled this year on there?
No.
Okay, well, that
And-
may be a clerical thing that can be easily
Yeah.
rectified.
For that, and I was trying to follow to FCS as well, and
Yeah,
it's the old one.
yeah, no, it is. It's,
So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention, we'll look at it.
still trying to pick away at it.
I would just say that
Oh,
ours is updated, but doesn't include all of the policies.
Yeah.
There are some that are more germane, like HHB, like that needs to be really clarified well to families, and that's physically located within the context of the handbook, but other things are not.
That's okay.
But they're linked.
Yeah.
You're thinking more about policies.
I was just wondering-
that refer to procedures,
Yeah.
like see the handbook for procedures like attendance.
Right.
or
If they
things
weren't-
like that, and then that's not current.
If it wasn't here, I was just wondering if it had been done somewhere else that I did not know about. And that's,
Do you have what would be I mean, we try to cross-reference,
yeah.
but, and I know the work that I did with the policy committee, you maintained a list of those that needed procedures, and I wonder,
Yeah.
a checklist to make sure that our policies our handbooks contain the policies that
Yeah.
need to be referenced in the handbook or procedures. If you have such a thing, it would be helpful, because otherwise, all four of us are going through the policies trying to find the language that references the handbook.
Sounds good.
So if there's just a list of policies that are supposed to be.
There's
That refer to
there's not
student
many.
handbooks.
There are like 4 or 5 that say this needs to be distributed to parents.
Well, you can have a list of 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So we do get guidance from the Vermont Principals Association about what should be in a handbook for
Yeah.
a public school. So we do receive some guidance, and much of that guidance is around policy and procedure, like the HHB
Right.
that was mentioned.
But they have some policies.
I understand it's specific to them.
Yeah.
But I didn't want them to think we were completely shooting in the dark here.
No.
Like we do have
Yeah.
some guidance from
No,
the
I believe
NPA.
it.
Right.
You did have
Around
a
this.
handbook, it's just from last
And
year.
actually, I think we shared that with you when we started the policy work too, that kind of comprehensive list from the AOE.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we may have some policies that are recommended or to be considered that aren't included on their guidance. So just making sure that communication is there will probably be helpful. Anything else for the principal? Yeah, Christine?
I just wanted to congratulate the senior class on their walk today.
A
And
little chilly.
Yeah.
Congratulate the weather, it held
yeah,
off.
yeah, it
very
did hold
nicely,
off until
yeah.
later, so
I have
that's
23,000 steps in today.
awesome.
Right.
That's
And
great.
What? Such a slacker, I know. And for some reason, the entire trip was uphill.
Because you went to Lincoln.
Well, it was Lincoln, and
Yeah.
we started at the Jerusalem store, who knew?
Yeah.
And ended up at Zeno Farm, that was pretty cool, that's a great facility.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Some
They're
great organizations that the kids picked, yes.
Yeah.
Good. And Christina, you judged, or you read did you read? Were you the reader for the
I was supposed to
spelling
be the
bee?
judge, but I ended up being the pronouncer, which I was really nervous about, but yeah, it was good. It was fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Ferrisburg won. Congratulations.
But it was
Was
very,
she-
very
What
close.
was her name? Phoebe?
Very close.
Oh, is that your
2 points.
granddaughter? Oh,
And, you know, actually, at the end, there was a really great
Susan.
comment made, and we know that some districts do this, is that maybe a future model might include, you know, we have an initial district round, but then sort of taking spellers from each team to go to the next level might be a really interesting model too.
The district team,
Yeah, district team.
I like that.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you for doing that.
All right, anything else for the principals before we move on? Okay, thank you all. All right, that brings us to the student report.
Wallaceathon raised around $4,000, and so that's going to be split evenly between Zeno Mountain Farm and the Love Your Brain Foundation. Very exciting. Musicals going strong. We're progressing really well. We've got a month until the show opens, and we're in a good place. And we're not stressed at all. The fall season of sports is starting to come to a close. Girls varsity senior games tomorrow. And the girls varsity soccer team beat Mount Abe for the first time in like 4 or 5 years, I think. So that's exciting. Then there was something that occurred last week, I believe, where the local youth group, Youth Alive, handed out Bibles in the front lobby, and it was all totally within policy. But there was mixed reactions to it. Some students and teachers really did not like it. So it is a little contentious for a little bit.
How so?
Some students were kind of just weirded out by the idea of kind of like an open religious recruitment happening in the school. Because the books were clearly not being handed out for like academic purposes. It was the youth group, the youth pastor there, handing out Bibles. On the particular Bible that they had a front page, which
I'm sorry, they were not handing them.
they were not handing them out.
Okay, so be clear about that.
Yeah,
They were on
they
the-
wanted to hand them out, but then Stephanie was like, "That's not cool." And so they had a table set up in the lobby, out of the way, where if students wanted to, they could come over and grab the Bibles.
Did you say there was a pastor from the church?
The pastor, is my understanding, was there, but he was there with students who were part of the youth group. And yeah, so that was just something that had some people, myself included, feeling a little uneasy.
I think it was clarified through administration that it did fall within the guidelines of
It definitely-
student sharing materials.
It definitely did, but I thought I would bring it up
Yep.
because the student body had a significant reaction to it, but it was all very much within policy.
Alden, you were saying something about the cover, but then you didn't finish what
Oh
you were
yeah,
saying.
this is more about just like the version of the Bible that they had. It was my personal biggest concern with it is you have like you open the cover and the first page says like, are you feeling depressed, alone, considering suicide, a whole bunch of negative things. Read on. And so for me, I didn't like religion being advertised as a treatment for mental illness in a secular environment, but that's just my personal feelings towards it. It's shared by other students and some of the faculty, but that's much more opinion-based than policy-wise.
Can you explain how that falls within?
I think Stephanie.
Guidelines?
I'm sorry, Sheila can.
Yeah, it's made available. The policy reads that information can be made available to students. It can't be distributed, as Stephanie was drawing attention to, but it's, information can be presented and made available for students. So we have all kinds of information made available to students. So our policy, distinguishes between distributing materials and making materials available. So
Does the policy say who can make the information
it
available?
does.
For
I can
instance,
bring it
that
up.
it's okay for the pastor to
It's
come
actually
there?
based on federal guidelines
Yeah.
that come
It's-
down through the First Amendment, and as long as a teacher or staff member who is employed by the school district is not a counselor for the group, you're okay. And they may need to be there as somebody who has to be part of the watching over the group for insurance purposes, but they can't run it. I only know this because this is part of what I teach in one of my classes.
Thank you.
But yeah, so
It's
you,
H4 is the policy distribution of non-school sponsored literature.
so the fact that there was a youth pastor is perfectly acceptable, but a teacher who is teaching here at the high school could not lead this group.
Gotcha.
Then you'd be getting into separation of church and state problems.
It's E21. Everybody should read E21.
Oh, it's because I'm looking at, H4 is still available online, which is what it used to be.
Yeah, they have the
Distribution of
code
non-school
drawn on,
sponsored literature in the school.
E21.
But it's the model policy, right, largely? Did you make changes from the model?
Can't remember, I mean, it's not, you should read, the things that we prohibit are libelous, violates the law, advocates for substance abuse, or puts or constitutes a direct and substantial danger to the health or welfare of students, incites violence, interferes with anybody's rights, is commercial in nature, and whose primary purpose is fundraising. We prohibit that kind of distribution. Other than that, the superintendent has a lot of leeway to put parameters around the reasonable time, place, and manner of distribution of non-school sponsored literature.
And this was in the lobby. Do you want to explain the
Yeah,
context?
I mean, to be perfectly clear, we have a pretty polite relationship with our area churches, and we try to maintain that. That's very important to the lives of a lot of our students. That's different here than in other communities in which I've worked, and we've tried to balance that. I have gotten requests from students to do things of that nature every year that I've been here. There's perhaps see you at the poll, where if you dropped your students off, you may notice that on a Wednesday in September, there's a prayer group around the flagpole. We have a Bible group that meets under we have an advisor, we allow them to meet here in the school. So there's a lot of that. This is a request that's happened before, but for various reasons having to do with the students' availability, they didn't do it in the past, and they did do it this year, and I was fully aware. I made sure that they understood the parameters. There was to be no handing of anything to anybody. They did say, could we have hot chocolate? And I said, yes, as long as you weren't selling it, because the policy prohibits us from selling that. So I think they made hot chocolate available. The student let me know that the youth pastor, I want to say Kaufman, it's Kaufman, but John, I think, who we have a relationship with, was going to stop by. And I didn't happen to be here that day, but from what I heard, they did exactly exactly what I asked them to do. They had it out of the way. They couldn't block anyone's access. They weren't handing it to anyone. And I also said, I want to know if anyone hassles you. So that was the extent of it. I thought it went very well, and it is, you know, within the parameters of the policy. So Alder and I had a conversation about what other things we might allow. And you know, he came to visit me and had examples of both items that they had, and one was a camo-covered little Bible. Kind of never seen one with a camo cover before, but we are in Addison County, so. But yeah, I thought it went very well, and you know, it was. I want to support these things to the extent that I can.
So I think it's policy B21, but it's also policy C27 for student distribution of literature. It basically says the same thing.
But even beyond our policies, it's, I found it, the Equal Access Act is the federal law that figures out how student groups can have fair and equal access to the school building. And there's parameters about what you can and can't do within that act.
Here's a question. What would you use to determine, what do you use to determine whether a community member can come in or not? I know you want to be open, and that's fine. But what's, like, how do you know the difference? You don't have to answer that question right now. But let's think of, that's something that's good to think about. The VSBA says that there's a model policy which could be considered. And remember, we didn't do all of those to be considered policies because we ran out of time. And I don't know, maybe we don't need it. Maybe we already have procedures. But like they have one, visits by parents, community members, or the media. And it sort of lays out some goal, like it lays out that the superintendent and the principals make procedures by which you determine who comes in and who doesn't. Maybe we should talk about that again sometime, another time. Or maybe you can point me directly to like the handbook or some other place where it's like you would use it.
So
I think you hire us for good judgment, and because we've exhibited good judgment. And I think, you know, in the absence of any guidelines, I use good judgment and always keep the safety and well-being of the students and adults under my care.
Okay.
Right.
would be
So I
my
think
answer.
if we need further clarification, that it could come through the policy committee.
Well, I don't know. It's the first time we've heard about something like that, or at least I have, so I'm just wondering. Thank you.
Yes.
I don't know if Alder's finished, but.
I don't think so. But
Okay. I don't want to interrupt you, though, but I had a question. I thought, was it Kevin Pierce, a snowboarder?
yeah.
Who came? I don't know if that's part of your
He
report.
100% did. And I was absent on a trip from Walden that day and completely forgot to mention it. So thank you for bringing that up, because from what I've heard, that was super cool. And people really appreciated talking. It was really motivational. Just slipped my mind.
It was awesome. It really was great. Much better than I thought. Yeah.
And
Yes, continue.
yeah, 9 students, I think. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure who's a student, who's not. Are going to the Up for Learning conference in Montpelier, which is based around student leadership. So that's exciting. Get a lot of student leaders, and it'll be featuring a lot of students who are currently involved in trying to change their school environment, and so hopefully they will get the tools to do so. And that's all that I have.
Great. Thank you very much.
Can I just say something, Alder?
Yeah.
I think the Community Engagement Committee might be interested in hearing, once you guys get back from that, about, because we're really committed to student voice as well. So I'd love to have a connection with some of those students who go to that conference and just hear about it. Maybe more in depth. We might not have as much time at a board meeting.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Are you going?
I am going.
Good.
I did hear that the men's soccer team had a slight uniform change their last game.
Oh, yeah. They were pink.
Bright pink.
Oh, wow. I had not heard of that, but I kind of love it, on a personal note.
was a breast awareness campaign. I guess this, they all bought their own uniforms for this game, so it didn't come out of anybody's budget. They just all paid the extra 60 bucks.
Boys or girls team?
The boys.
The boys. Thank you.
They were all covered up. I didn't see it, but I guess they were all covered up until game time, and then they dropped ropes, and somebody yelled out, "Burning my retinas."
All right, anything else for Alder? All right, moving on to the board reports. I had a lot to say, so I put a written report in that summarized some meetings that I attended on behalf of our board, a side letter that I signed on all of your behalf, some process for public comment, questions around collaboration outside of Addison Northwest. So we did have some conversations about sharing resources with our neighboring districts in the past. We've had success with the Food Service Collaborative, and I just wanted to put that out there so it's in everyone's head as we go into budget season here, and as we're entering into beginning conversations around the future of our district and what that might mean. What, if any, further collaboration would we be expecting with, neighboring districts? Because we can only hit so many fronts at one time. So just put that out there. And also a link to the VSBA newsletter. Does anybody have any questions on any of those items?
I have one
Mhm.
statement. But about the public comment, I just want to make sure, I think what you have written here is correct and good, and we would all be wise to follow that. Mostly because, it's really tough for us to enter into a conversation at the moment with anyone, and I really screwed it up last time just by asking some questions. I was just trying to think out loud. And really, I hope that I'm speaking for me, that I won't do that again, and I'll let Sue and Sheila talk to the public, and then we can figure out what it means later on. So that's a mea culpa. How about that?
Thank you.
Well, it's really just a matter of, if it's not on the agenda, then the public has been warned, and we can't talk about something that they weren't warned about that they might want to come and hear. So if we start talking about things that we haven't told them we're going to talk about, we get in trouble.
Right. Well, and also, if we start trying to solve problems that Sheila hasn't had an opportunity to try to solve, we will also get in trouble, because Sheila needs to have an opportunity to solve that problem, so that if the problem isn't solved by Sheila, it can be brought back to the board to evaluate Sheila's decision. And if we've been involved along the way, we can't evaluate her decision, as outlined in policy A22.
That I can recall, but I've been at other board meetings and other places where people come to share information, not necessarily a complaint, but they're just sharing some piece of information that it's not even a topic that is connected to any of the work we're doing. It may be an issue they would like to see us take up, it's a wish or something, but I think it would be difficult to determine how we're going to follow up on anything that's brought before the board. It's sort of like on an individual case-by-case basis, I think, depending on what's brought forward. Some things might require immediate attention. Some things might just be like, well, that's good food for thought. Whenever we talk about that at some point in the future, we'll remember that was shared. But it may not everything necessarily warrants immediate follow-up. I guess my point.
It's just challenging when there's a public comment where information comes out that's inaccurate.
Right.
It is challenging.
Right. And that can happen a lot, actually.
Yes.
But it hasn't happened here, but in other places.
No, it did happen here.
It hasn't happened to me
Yeah.
here.
Well, and in the link that Finn forwarded to you, it does say it is permissible to try and make a short correction to any factual errors that you can back up, but you really just want to move on as fast as you can.
Right. Anything else? So kind of along those lines, and in trying to keep our work focused a little bit, we have had ongoing conversations about board goals, which we're not really on a schedule because, of course, we had to hire a new superintendent, and then our board retreat was pushed back to September. But so that we can hopefully go into next year on the sort of schedule that's on our work plan, if we could get 1 or 2 goals sort of defined in writing for this school year, I think that would be helpful. And I made a list of some topics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I have 8 topics, that have come up at our retreats and in our board discussions that I'm going to put out to you all right now, just the topics, so that you can tell me if I'm missing anything. And what I would like to do is actually bring goal statements around these topics to our next meeting, and you guys can all, and they'll go out in the packet so you can see them ahead of time, and you guys can all rank them, and then whatever gets ranked number 1, or maybe number 1 and 2, depending on how big and chunky they are, we can just kind of grab them for the remainder of the year. Does that seem like a reasonable way to just kind of get this process started?
Sure.
All right, so these are the topics that I have, so please shout out any that I've missed. Facility plan, a website and branding of the school district, monitoring progress toward our vision, standardizing committee reporting, aligning committee structures and goals with the vision, system for board self-evaluation, board training, and developing goals for student achievement data.
You want to discuss now, or you want to just think about it?
If there's anything that you know right now is missing, go ahead and tell me. If you want to send me an email after, if any of those seem like you should blitz them immediately, yeah, go ahead. Anybody has anything?
Are those those are not in your report?
They were not in my report, no, sorry. Do you want me to read them again?
Well, I'm not going to remember them, that's for
You
sure.
just
Maybe
send
you
it out
could.
and-
Do you want me
could
to email them to you
Send them
right
to
now?
us, Sue,
I'll
and,
respond, just an email.
yeah.
Okay. Yes, I will email that, and again, these are just sort of the topics. I would actually write like more of a goal statement, but they can be, it's not about the wording necessarily, it's about the idea, right?
Right.
So yeah, but anything that's missing, or if any of these seem like, where the heck did you find that? I mean, I did get these all from my notes from the meetings, but my notes are not your notes, so. But I'll send that out by email. Cool. All right. So, Christina, I know you went to a
Yes.
meeting.
I attended the Hannaford Career Center board meeting last Wednesday. And they had I'm just going to give you a short rundown. I don't know if you guys, I know you get the newsletter that the superintendent sends out. And in case you don't read it, this is a short recap of some of the things that are going on there. They had their fall open house on October 4th, and they saw a 5-fold increase in attendance, which I thought was pretty cool. And they attributed that to finally changing the date. They used to hold their open house the same day everybody else did.
Oh.
So that was pretty cool. They had 132 people. 32 went to North Campus. They also had their 3 different lab areas open, and they had the Makery Space mentors doing demonstrations. So that could have also been a pretty good draw for them, too. I wanted to let you know that on November 1st, the Makery Space is going to have their grand opening that the Adult Ed program is launching. And that means that the lab spaces will be open every Thursday starting November 1st to December 27th from 5 to 9 o'clock. So basically, anybody can go in there.
Wow.
And use the space. They adopted a vision for that Makery Space, which is to bring to life a place for people to imagine, experiment, network, collaborate, and create for personal and professional growth.
Wow.
So that was that. And then the last thing I wanted to just mention is they held a summer program this summer called at Deep Roots Farm. It was a summer program that was run by Middlebury's summer lunch program and the rec program. And a bunch of students participated in that, middle school students and elementary school students. And that farm, Deep Roots Farm, grew 3 hogs that the ag students are networked in with them, and they're putting on a fundraiser on November 7th called Pork-a-Palooza, and it's going to be at Rough Cuts Barbecue at 51 Main in Middlebury from 5 to 9. It's a fundraiser for the ag students at Hannaford. And they basically, the owner, Sarah Gerard, purchased and processed the 3 hogs that these kids tended to all summer, and then the ag students have participated in that as well at Hannaford. And she's a past graduate of Hannaford, which I thought was pretty cool. And then lastly, I just thought I'd share some data that they presented, which this semester at Hannaford, there are 349 students enrolled, which is up from last year, and 117 of those are Virgin students. If anybody wants to look at any of the figures, and it's broken down by class, department, or whatever. So anyway, that's the report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, Lori is not here, so Diana, community engagement?
Okay, so we are moving towards, we've posted on Front Porch Forum, both Ferrisburg and the Virgins Front Porch Forum, about our community conversation on the 25th. I've got 5 possible students for facilitation, and have sent out a copy of our, what am I calling it? Our kind of a script of what the whole thing's going to look like, and so that they can see it ahead of time. Beth and I are not going to actually train them till an hour before the event. So it's just coming up with a time when they don't have to be pulled out of class, and when we're both available. So I know a lot of the kids, so I think they're going to be great. And Catherine has had to drop off of the committee. We have a new member who hopefully will come to our Thursday meeting, Ben Huston, who volunteered to be on, and we're going to still be looking for one more new committee member. Christina's gotten the food all settled. We're going to be serving a meal for this first one, and that's starting at 5:30. And then the actual breakout sessions will start at 6:15. So. And you all saw Marilyn's presentation last week, right? Which
That's great.
saw myself, so.
So we have to give a number for the meal, so if anyone knows now at this table if they will be attending, you can let us know, or RSVP at that link.
Okay.
I'll come, but not for the meal. I'll come after the meal.
Okay, not for the meal.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Great. Okay. And there will be childcare, as far as I know, but we don't
That
know
I
yet.
might take you up on.
We just don't know whether no one's signed up. I don't know. Gloria's in charge of the Google form, right?
And I don't know yet. I've asked her for RSVP numbers. We were waiting till a little closer to the event. So we have one person slated right now to service childcare, so we'll need to know soon if we think it's gonna be a lot more than that. Because that will be a lot. I've also offered to help with the childcare at the point I can, I'm finished with my thing, but I don't necessarily want to be, I'd like to be able to observe the
Well,
discussions. so.
Yeah, I think that would be good if you could.
But it's hard to find, the childcare. We need to have some adult oversight over that because there are some liability issues. So we have Tara Brooks overseeing it, and depending how many people respond, we'll get others to support, hopefully. But as you know, it's difficult to find volunteers for things, so.
Well, one of our committee members, Judy Elson, offered to do
Oh,
childcare.
excellent.
too.
That will be very helpful.
Yeah.
So we're probably covered.
Well, that will happen before we all convene again, so good luck. I mean, I will be there, but,
Yeah.
good luck.
I know, it's sneaking up on us.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, facilities. You're up.
Tom regrets that he couldn't be here tonight. So Ken reported on the project, which is ongoing. They're hoping to hand over the HIVAC controls from EEI to Ken sometime this week or next. We're starting to move into the checking and tweaking of the systems. We should remind the board, as Ken has reminded the staff, that this will be a year-long process. Last month, the board asked the Facilities Committee to review the security and safety plan. We have begun this process. The administration is doing a lot of work to update the many facets of these plans. It is worth noting that there are a number of plans. Part of this is about integrating the plans that exist. The current plan is to report to the board in February. Part of this is about safety in terms of wellness. Many on the board might have heard about the concern with lead in the water. The administration has a plan for addressing this. This will include testing the highest risk faucets and sinks, 80 across the district, and removing some that are not needed. If there are problems, they will be addressed. Ultimately, the plan is to test all of the faucets in the district.
So when you say, just to clarify, when you say concern about lead in the water, that's just a statewide concern?
That's
We don't
right.
have any indication that we have any lead in our waters here?
We don't, however, the concern at the state level is not necessarily about lead in the water supply.
Right.
It is about lead that's being picked up from lead pipes and solder that holds the copper pipes together within our water system and within the water faucets and dispensers.
Right.
So it's,
No, I understand.
I think
just-
the
yeah.
anticipation is that we're gonna find some, but we don't think that it's grievous.
Okay.
But
But
we
I just
won't
wanted
know.
to clarify that when you say the concern, we don't, there's no current
No,
evidence that we
No.
have concern here. We're waiting for testing.
Yep.
Yes.
Just one thing to add. There's the LED lighting has been installed here in the library,
mhm.
which is cool.
Nice,
More evidence of project moving forward.
great.
Yeah,
Yes. Anything else?
all positive.
Thank
No,
you.
that
Okay.
was,
Great. Good. Okay, finance. So John, is that you? Did you do the bills?
I did do the
They're,
bills.
they're
Just
in
now?
they're in that red folder.
I
the-
have them, yeah, too.
Okay, great.
Finance Committee will meet in November.
November
Sheila wrote the
8th
date
or 9th
down
or something.
In her report, and I don't I can't remember.
Oh,
Ninth.
November 9th. Okay.
November 9th. That's it.
Yeah. Excellent. And you submitted a written report
did.
for the policy committee.
I submitted.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you did. I read it.
Very, very thorough.
It's all there.
It's all there. Anyone have any questions for John about the policies? I think you have policy, B31 on is still in process.
It is.
Yes, I think the administration and the negotiations committee have all agreed that that policy is okay at this time.
All right. Then it'll be, remain unchanged.
There you go.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. And negotiations, Mark.
Not much, as we told last time, our last meeting on the 8th, we had just met with the teachers for our first meeting. It went quite well. We will meet with them again on the 29th of this month. And tomorrow we will meet with the staff for our first actual step of talking about proposals. That's where we are.
Okay, we're up to action items. So,
Okay. So, I move that we oh, wait, I'm sorry.
no, you
Doing it
can
again,
still
right?
go for it.
I
Keep
move that we
going.
approve the minutes.
Second.
All right, any
All right.
edits or comments on the minutes from October 8th? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that has passed. Now, John, up
All right,
again.
I approve, or I move that we approve the bills and directors' orders for the month of September in the amount of $4,356,758.98.
Oh, boy.
I have them right here. I'll give
Now
you
I
the-
got it.
And that's all encompassed
That's the bills and directors order. Payroll, for, $1,226,534.70. And total student account disbursements of $16,504.57.
Wait. Say that again?
$16,504.57.
Thank you.
That makes sense. All right, we have a second. Any questions?
Just like the number for the bills and directors orders, that's big, that's really big. A lot of that is EEI work, so just, it's much bigger than, like, last month was
Right.
500,000. so.
Right, right. It did sound very big, yes. Any questions for John? Everything checked out?
Yeah, no, I reviewed, we're doing the same process, I reviewed 10 bills and followed them all the way back to their purchase orders and receipts. 4 payroll back all the way to contracts, and student accounts, again, same thing, back to receipts, so. Everything's fine.
Good. So all in favor of approving those bills and directors' orders, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are approved. So we have action item C, just to update our committee membership for the record. Someone want to make a motion there?
Move to acknowledge that Chris is gonna back off of finance and Catherine Legoff is not gonna be part of CEC.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Thank you, Chris.
Yes?
Thank you, Chris.
And
And
Catherine?
thank you, Catherine.
All right, so all in favor of acknowledging those resignations, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That concludes our action items. We're up to discussion items, transportation for private school in our region.
So, sorry, I'm trying to pull up the right email. I should have had it already pulled up, but I guess I'll find the specific email. You know what I'm talking about, back and forth about. But
About
the private school in our region, it just came to my attention that kids that go to the private school in our region hop on our buses and get dropped off at that location. And they always have, apparently. So in speaking to the director, she informed me that she was a student herself in the 70s, and she believes that even at that time, transportation was provided to the kids that attend there. Now she's the director. I was assuming that probably in the 70s you owned your own buses. I was just assuming that. So it was probably an arrangement that made sense, and I just didn't know if there had ever been like a formal recognition that these services were being provided at no cost to these students. So
And when you say they hop on our bus, that means we're picking them up at their home.
we're picking them up at their homes and dropping them off at their school. From what I understand, their end of their school day doesn't align with our bus run, so it's a one-way trip. They get a ride in, they don't go home. So Elizabeth and I at one point put our heads together, and that's the email I'm trying to pull up.
I would pull it up.
That's kind of.
I would
here we go.
think, though, that if the students are attending a private school, then the parents are paying for that, and they are also paying to support this school through their taxes. And so it really isn't costing us anything that isn't being reimbursed
Reimbursed by what?
by their taxes.
But everybody pays taxes.
Everybody.
Yeah.
People who don't have any kids at all.
That's right. But if we're transporting our children, as long as the bus is not going 5 miles out of its way to pick up a child, I think the parents are paying taxes, and what does it cost us?
Well, so the buses are picking up at their homes, so wherever they live. I don't know how many miles it is. I don't know where they live.
So you came up with $605 per student. You know, you tweaked it.
But I'm not sure I'm following your logic, George, because if I said, I'm a taxpayer and I want you to bring me to work tomorrow on the school bus,
No.
would we do that?
The school buses run to pick up students and take them to school.
The public school.
I understand that, but I think that those parents are paying taxes, and if we're providing school bus transportation to students, they're paying for it.
But if they're not students
They're not
of the
students of our school.
Right, if they're not students of our school and there's an accident, are they covered because they're not enrolled in our schools?
But the thing there is that we are employing a bus company, and the bus company is providing that insurance.
I think Betcha Transit would be liable.
Yeah, that would be Betcha's problem, not ours.
It would be. That makes sense. We can check into it, but I think it would be
Yeah.
Betcha Transit.
George, what do you think?
Me?
Yeah, you looked like you were gonna say something. No?
I wasn't.
He's warming up.
And I mean, we didn't put this on like as an action
Right.
item. It was more of a
Discussion,
discussion,
right.
just like, are you aware and should we at some point acknowledge that we are providing, like, so that it's documented somewhere, that the board discussed this and affirmed the practice or decided against the practice, or, I just feel like it should be, other than me calling and having someone say, oh, no, it's always been that way.
Any of us were
Yeah.
aware at all.
Right.
I mean, not me,
Or maybe
So
just,
so you guys don't feel like you were aware?
not at
I was
all.
not aware.
Anything about it at all.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
hold
and maybe folks aren't aware too. I mean, my understanding is
We
it
don't
it has been the
No.
policy to allow the Christian school kids to also play on the sports teams. I mean, I had, when I coached at Addison for soccer and basketball,
Right.
there were Christian school kids from Addison
We
who
were
played
saving a route.
on those teams as well.
Right, I
Well,
think,
homeschool.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
for sports participation, they fall under the same category as homeschooled kids, right? Kids who go to private schools can play on our
Yes.
sports
Yep.
teams. That's, yeah, I think there's a precedent, or there's a law, maybe,
I don't know if
that
it's a
mandates
law.
that, or, I'm not
I don't know
sure.
if it's a law, but there,
Transportation is also precedent.
right?
Well, and, right,
1947 U.S. Supreme Court case that, not completely, but having transportation paid for through public funds for private schools was found to be appropriate.
Appropriate?
It was not a violation of separation of church and state, and it could happen, so that if we have this standing thing, it's not violating anything, it's okay.
It's not violating anything.
It's not violating, but does that mean we have to condone it, or we have to acknowledge it, or could
Well,
we?
this is reimbursing for students taking public transportation. They reimbursed, the public district reimbursed both private and public students,
I see.
and the court said that was permissible. So this is
Right.
slightly different,
Yeah.
and it's also 65 years later.
Right.
So, but Diana, you were saying it's permissible, but
But do we have to, because it's permissible, does that mean we are bound to do it? That's my question.
And just to give you a little bit further information, when we just sort of said, well, what would let's just put a price tag on what that is, we
Yeah.
determined it's about $16,963.
A year?
a year.
Yeah.
Well, and
of transportation costs that we're
Right.
providing.
If
to-
we take our contract and divide that up, we come up with a per pupil cost for transportation, and then we take that and multiply by the number of students in our community that go to their school. That's the only way we can do the math. It's not based on individual ridership, but nor is our transportation contract based on how many people actually get on the bus.
16,900.
16,900.
But would our
63.
contracts at all change if we weren't taking them?
Well,
Would
that's
we
what
pay
Elizabeth was
any-
just saying.
Well,
We're not sure if it's to the point where
currently
they're adding
have-
routes because these
Right.
kids,
We
or
have
or if
12
we could-
buses. We have 12 bus routes right now, split amongst the different towns in the district that we are paying for on contract. So at what point does the students attending that school cause us to need to keep one of those routes that we could otherwise get rid of? Or have to add a route or whatever? I mean, at 28 students, that's not a full bus. It's a half of a bus.
If they all are riding.
If
and we
they're
don't even know
all
who they
riding, but they're
are.
not all riding the same bus
Right.
either, so.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily advocating one way or the other. The
Right.
only thing I'm kind of trying to do is publicly document
we are
our
doing this.
acknowledgement of this, so that we're not trying to revisit this in 5 years, trying to figure out, how did this come to be, and are people aware, and,
And it's good information for us to have as we go into budgeting as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Christina, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, well, I was just thinking to myself, are there any other similar situations in the state like this?
Not that
Maybe
I'm
that we could find out
aware
about.
of, but I could certainly ask if other people.
We wouldn't necessarily save $16,900 if
No,
we
because like,
stopped.
if it
Contracts
doesn't,
are
if it doesn't cut us down a bus, it doesn't
Right.
save us a dime, right?
Right.
That
I
bus
think
is
it's
still
important to
traveling.
think of
Right.
it that way, too.
Right, but like Elizabeth was saying, where is the tipping point, you know? I mean,
Right.
depending on how many.
Right
We
now it's
also
28
wouldn't
students.
let, I mean, not to be flip, but we also wouldn't let an adult that needed to get from one end of our region to, you know, hop on the bus simply because they were a taxpayer and we were driving by, right?
Right.
Like there's,
Right.
you know,
It's only for elementary and secondary school students. It's only for, our buses are only for elementary and secondary. They're not for the general
not-
public.
Right.
at this point, it's not public transportation.
Are any of these non-resident students? Is there a non-resident student that we make a
Not to my
bus trip
knowledge.
for?
No.
Because that is required by the board to approve.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they all live in
They're
in
all
our
within
community. And, you know, and speaking with the director too, many of these kids, when they go to high school, come to our high school. So, not all of them, but many of them. So this is just where they attend elementary school.
The other thing that you need to consider is that this is a precedent that's been going on for multiple tens of years. I mean, we've got a real backlog of this has been happening, and why would we stop it at this point in time?
Because we're a new district and we need to consider everything we do from, we just, I'm not advocating one way or the other, George. I just think that, I don't think that we can talk about what happened when we were Addison Northwest Supervisory Union. We are now Addison Northwest School District, and we just need to be very clear about what we're doing.
Okay?
Well, and also, as our student numbers decline, our cost per student is going to increase. So
true.
if there's a higher percentage of students that we're transporting that aren't going to our schools, there is going to be a tipping point there, I would think, at some
But
point,
their-
in terms of
their-
expense.
Their enrollment is doing the same thing that ours is. It's dropping. And
Well, I
and
haven't
so I
studied their
think
enrollment, so I don't know.
It's kind of a parallel thing. And I don't, you brought it up so the board knows it happens. I don't think the board needs to take action.
It's not an action item, it's just a discussion.
No, I understand that this time, but things that come under discussion at one meeting end up being action items at another meeting.
Well, sometimes.
And I don't think that this warrants that at this point.
Well, like I said, I think it's good information. Thank you for bringing it up for us to have in our heads when we enter into the budget season.
I'd suggest, okay, I mean, like, our policy is like, the superintendent, you do have this control.
Right.
I mean, we've given it to you to establish routes and designate stops. That is for the superintendent to decide. However, we do ask for a report, and you're gonna give one later on. And we got sort of a report on some money, but we've yet to get a report on ridership and the routes and those kinds of things. So that's where our oversight of like this particular issue, I think, would be best served in that regard.
Yes, and I think during the process of doing that research is where Sheila probably discovered this. Right.
That and a request came forward from someone who wanted to attend a private school in Burlington, and we do have some transportation for particular students from our region that go up to Burlington for school, and this parent was wondering if they could hop on that bus, and they can't.
And they can or they
They
can't?
cannot, because those buses are reimbursed through special ed, and they're for students with needs. So, but that's what.
But that wouldn't be clear to someone watching the school buses drive down the
Go by
street.
there, right. And so they just kind of opened up
Right.
a series of questions for me.
All right. Anything else? Great. Okay, so we have the board self-evaluation, it's live, and we thought we would try it out once tonight. It's about, what, 10, 12 questions. So Sheila, did you want us to not click on it through the?
Well, go ahead, but to be clear, I didn't change the permissions yet. If you're not a board member, please don't take this survey.
I already did it.
Okay.
It's not a board assessment, it's a self-assessment of the board. So,
Right.
in the future, we'll email that out to them rather than have it be a live link on our published agenda.
Maybe we will have a public assessment of the board at some time in the future.
Voting.
So, yeah, we're gonna take a few minutes to complete that, and then we have a couple executive sessions. So you guys are welcome to stick around, but that's
Went
going
over
to
to the
be
grave
how our meeting concludes here.